morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Yeah? Now, before we get started, don't be alarmed by my accent. I'm not unwell, I'm just British. It's okay, all right? And so, today what I'm going to be talking to you about is really the challenges to do with designing for everyone. And to kind of get us started, I wanted just to briefly look at, is this working? Nope, clicker's not working. 1 second. So when you think about it, the notion of home sharing is really quite odd. We take two people from other sides of the planet, more than times than not, they don't speak the same language, there are cultural barriers, and through product design and through marketing and with a lot of trust, we manage to create a scenario where they feel comfortable staying in each other's homes. And when things go well, we get the kinds of amazing experiences that show us that we are more alike than we are different. Things that close the gender, the wealth, the cultural divides that separate us. And when things go badly, well, a couple of years ago, before I joined Airbnb, I always wanted to go to Chile. And so I pulled up Airbnb and managed to find a great place to stay. I was corresponding with my host backwards and forwards, like the day was rapidly approaching, flew out 27 hours in the air, eventually landed late at night in a country that I don't speak the language. And I was wandering around the streets. It was dark, I was feeling quite lost, not knowing what to do. And then I reached the front door, knocked, she opened the door, and immediately in broken Spanish said that I can't stay. And I said, well, why? Like, I paid, I booked. And she goes, no, you can't. You can't stay because you're black. And in that moment, I remember feeling so rejected and so alone and feeling like I just didn't belong. You see, when things go badly, we end up with the kinds of product experiences that can really fuel the divides between us. It brings out the bias. Underrepresented groups, like whether it be someone who is a racial minority or people with mobility limitations, can often feel like the platforms we build are not for them. Now, if you had have asked me back in those days, if Airbnb had reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to come and join us to try and solve discrimination? Well, I mean, my response would have been, hell no. But clearly, I'm a glutton for punishment, because here I am. My name is Benjamin, and I am the design lead of the anti-discrimination team. And so we use design to try and solve problems like bias, problems that Airbnb didn't create, but that exist within us all as human beings. And today, I'm going to be talking to you about why challenging bias is the key to building great products. I'm going to start off by walking through 3 very short case studies that kind of illustrate the challenges that we had to push our way through, how we almost failed our way into a set of inclusive design principles, and how we're using these principles to really unlock product growth and user growth around the world. Now, before we get into that, I just want to play a quick 20-second game. I'm going to show you a slide, and I would like you to tell me how many triangles you see in this. Call out any number. 6, 7, 8. I love it. Some of you are getting really into this. Now, actually, it's just one of these interesting optical illusions, because there actually aren't any clear triangles within that. Our brain is connecting lines based upon preconditioned habits and expectations we have. And I show you that to highlight the fact that we all have bias. Often we think of bias as being this terrible thing, to have bias, but really it's our brain's way of helping us navigate a world where we are just overloaded with information. So we form these shortcuts so that we can navigate this world. And when things go well, they help us build friendships, we bond with people who are like-minded, and when things go badly, well, it can cause us to create product decisions that really alienate large groups of people. So where do we get started? Like, how do you use design to solve discrimination? No one? All right. That was actually the question that was waiting for me on the very first day in the office, and it was terrifying. As a designer, my default is to go back into process when I don't know the answer. And so immediately, I reached out human-centered design, starting off with empathizing with users so that we can ideate some solutions, prototyping, launching, and then testing them. And so we went out into the world and spoke to 2 big groups of people. One were underrepresented groups on our platform, trying to understand how is it that discrimination is experienced by them. And then on the other side, we spoke to experts, trying to uncover what are some solutions that you believe we could use to tackle this problem in product. We got a lot of ideas up on the whiteboard, and it covered everything from simple things like maybe you should just remove profile photos through to like having better community standards. And immediately as a team, we sat down and tried to prioritize these. The problem that we immediately ran into is that no one agreed on the right answers. We tried some dot ranking. Everyone gets a series of dots. You put it next to the ideas that you think would work. But because we each had such subjective experiences with discrimination, we didn't get any close clusterings around specific ideas. Some people would say that we should remove photos from user profiles as a way to kind of remove the triggers that cause bias. Whereas other people would say that, no, we should do the opposite. We should add photos, figure out ways that we can build commonality between people. Here's an example of my profile on Airbnb. And one of the thoughts was, could removing this actually kind of solve discrimination? Or at least, reduce the likelihood of it happening? And so over here, we have a removed profile photo experience. And then the opposite of that, like let's add in more photos highlighting my love of bacon and coffee. Maybe we can bond over that. But even so, we still ended up at this impasse as a team. And as tensions began to flare around the team sprint room, we were completely stuck. And in those moments, it was really tempting to say, okay, let's just pick an idea and go. But because the problem that we're solving is discrimination, if we fail or make the wrong product decision, it's not a drop in metrics, it's potentially a hate crime. And so what do? Well, I panicked, like deeply panicked, because it appeared that in that moment, the thing that should have empowered us to solve this problem, our differences, the fact that we are a diverse team, that we have people across the race and the gender and age spectrums, it seemed like these things were actually counting against us by preventing us from being able to reach any kind of a consensus. We ran into an insight in speaking with a person called Kat Holmes, who is with the Microsoft Inclusive Design team. And she highlighted that we're trying to solve a problem of bias on the platform without first addressing our own internal bias. And so even though we followed the right steps in going out and speaking to a diverse audience, when we came back into the team room, we were filtering those insights through our own experiences. Kat said that the problem with human-centered design is that no one really says which human you should place at the center. And in the absence of that insight, we were placing our own experiences and ranking ideas based upon this. So to get past this idea, we went round and round for quite a while before deciding to try a little experiment where we just created some space. Space to have awkward conversations with leadership, conversations amongst other teams, forums to kind of have a discussion to understand each other's perspectives and what are the assumptions that we're bringing when we come into product, when we come into the team room. It was really about finding empathy amongst our team. We reflected back at the team mission, that we believe in belonging. And if that is our vision, if that is our North Star, then now when we look at a comparison between, say, removing profile photos and adding it, well, suddenly things become a little bit clearer. Because you can't be accepted, you can't feel like you belong unless someone is at least aware of who you are. And so removing things like profile photos isn't really the option, because it means that you're having to just almost hide until the point of first meet. We codified this into one of our first principles, and it's called owning your lens. And it's actually fairly simple to get started. It sounds, almost more complicated than it is, but you head out and you start by identifying your assumptions. One of the quickest ways you can do this is whenever you're kicking off a product sprint, a research project, whatever it might be, ask who are we missing from the room in our considerations. That just kind of broadens your horizon so everything is not rooted in your experience as the designer. Next, we then seek out diverse thinking, really embracing that. It's really easy to think that we have diversity at our fingertips, especially when we can sit up late at night arguing with someone on Reddit who is 50,000 miles away. And then lastly, you need to create space within your teams. These decisions, these conversations are not easy. They are often tense, but if you're able to create that with your leadership, with the people that you work with, you're actually able to start identifying weaknesses or failure points within your reasoning and your product. So now, we had been iterating through some ideas over the couple months, and then we ran into a next obstacle. which is you have these insights from these different groups. Now, how do you bring these into product? We know as makers that changing product is hard, and it's even harder when you're trying to bring a change that is based upon the needs of a minority of your user base. I kind of like to call this Spock's law of product management, that we almost think about things that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. We build for these averages. But what is average? Like, is there averages of race? Is there averages of gender? Like, even thinking in this way, we almost may be clouding our ability to find solutions. What it also does is when we think in averages is we open ourselves up to competition because our competitors can find a way to serve the needs of those who feel like our platform is not for them. And of course, there's always the threat of alienating users. Now, Anne Diaz, one of our lead researchers, happened upon an insight when we were actually iterating our way through trying to solve race-based discrimination, which is even as we are looking at the problem of bias on the platform, we still weren't really considering the extreme edge cases, people who have potentially severe physical or cognitive limitations. Everyone has these different constraints. And so the challenge that we now had is how can we find a way to bring insights that would help these groups into product? Now, the person behind me, this is Shrin. He's one of our newest product managers, and he has a disability that necessitates the use of a powered wheelchair. And so for him, using Airbnb is a very different experience. The homes that he looks for have to have very specific accessible amenities. An example of this is like step-free access. You're entering a front door, even a 1 or 2 inch step is enough to prevent him from entering the room. There's also other things like grab rails attached to whether it be bathrooms or lowered counters. And so whereas the average Airbnb experience is you search for a place, you compare, and then you make a booking, for Shrin, he ended up having to search for various places. Then he'd have to like study the listings because there was no way to filter based upon the specific accessibility amenities. You'd have to compare these, message the host, go backwards and forwards, trying to clarify, is it really step-free access or is it just like a lip? I need to know. He would then confirm it several more times, book, and then finally just hope. So Anne saw this as an extreme need, a need that sits at the edge of our experience as a platform. And so she followed the first principle, owned that lens, conducted research. She went around to different teams to try and get some design help and actually built a simple prototype. And all it really is that on one side, a host can categorize the accessible amenities in their home. And on the other side, a guest can search for those amenities when looking for a place to stay. It seems like a really simple product choice, but there are 23 different criteria or different filters that you need to be able to filter by. And so to bring this into product is actually a huge scale. And progress slowed. It was hard to rally people around. We all have best intentions. We know that these users matter. But we also only have a certain amount of resources, even us as a large company. And how do you decide where you prioritize? How do you balance the extreme edge cases of experience with that of larger groups? So an insight that came out of the work that Anne was doing was realizing that we actually need to align these designs with a core business case. It's not enough to act on best intentions. And there was a gentleman called Carl Grove, who's an accessibility consultant. And he said that when it comes down to 3 businesses, there are really only 3 cases that matter. Does what you're doing make money? Does it save money? Or does it reduce risk? Now, Anne started to rework the case for bringing these filters to product. And within it, this is the way that she framed this to the various other teams to recruit more and more people to build progress. One of the core components of our platform is about accuracy. As a guest, you want to know that if a host says their home has a washing machine or a clothes dryer, that it's either electric or that it's just railing, or whether it's a string from the window. You need to know that, or else you arrive at the door and have an expectation-reality gap. And so in trying to build accessible amenity filters, ways that we can help hosts categorize their homes on a step level, on this really granular level, we're actually building out a process that helps our hosts be able to categorize every amenity in their home. And so we realized that by solving for the needs of the few, we can find ways to improve the lives of the many. And so because of this, we now have these accessibility filters in product. And we're realizing that our hosts are adopting them. We're getting increased accuracy across the board. And we're able to do so by appealing to the core business needs as well as people's desire to do well. We codified this into the second principle. It was about championing the others. where you are looking for the edges of experience within your product. Every single edge that there is in your product, an edge case, as they might be, represents a point of failure. It represents an unmet need, a group of your users who can be captured by someone else or just made to feel like they don't belong. Then you need to make a case. Align your business goals, align the way that your business operates and what matters within your teams, whether it be metrics or whether it be a vision, with the decisions and the choices that you want to bring to product. And then lastly, recruit allies. Like, there are people out there who really want to help, who value these changes, who want to be a champion. And if you just are vocal about what it is that you're doing, it is much easier for them to congregate around you so you can build the momentum needed. And then the last step is, you can have owned your lens. You can champion the needs of others. But if your user base doesn't accept the work, then it won't resonate with them. If they don't feel that it meets their needs, the larger, greater needs, who we would typically call the average core groups on our platforms, they may rebel. And we saw this with the accessibility features launch. Now, there's been great growth. Hosts are adopting it. But still, growth and adoption is not as quick as we would like it to be. And so we did a research study looking at what are the reasons for this? Why would people object to the process of increasing the exposure of your home by letting people filter for specific amenities? And we had an insight that came through from one of our hosts. She was worried that by highlighting the accessibility amenities, she felt that people who didn't have disability needs would feel that her home is not for them. And this was one of those really weird moments for us as a team, because it was one of those moments where we realized that although we all kind of owned our lenses, we hadn't brought our audience on exactly the same journey. And so this next insight really doesn't come from an external pressure like PR or a protest or even internally like a thought leader. It really comes about through one of our team members acting on the first two principles. Her name is Jennifer Hom, and she is our illustration manager for the company. And she recently did an audit of the way that we represent the world to our users in illustrations. And typically, or formally, the style of our company was very much like minimal lines, like kind of a very neutral color palette. And we realized that in doing this, we actually weren't showcasing any kind of real breadth as to the human experience. The world that we were reflecting back to our users was not one that represented the world that they're from. And so when we start pushing features or shipping ideas that they don't feel match with their narrative of the world, they're like, who is this for? Why does this really matter? I don't understand this. So Jennifer started to redesign the illustrations on the site, this time focused on representation, focused on capturing the entire breadth of the human experience. She also reimagined some of the illustrations to raise awareness about the differences that separate us. And this is actually one of my favorite images, because it's one of these contextual scenes that communicates transferring, like handing over of keys, a host giving home keys to a guest. And within this one image, we have people from different ages, we have different genders, we have, when you look really closely, you can see someone with a prosthetic limb. And it doesn't stand out in this really weird and garish way that we're trying to draw attention to it. It is just a representation as to the world that we actually live in. And a similar thing with a guest communicating with their potential host. This particular guest has a hearing aid, a hearing implant. And again, it's very subtle, but by doing these, we're realizing that we can reflect to our users the world that they actually belong in. We can open up their perspectives. We can help them to own their lens without needing to browbeat over anything. The way that we're building on Jennifer's work is by redesigning the accessibility categorization flow. Whereas before, the first time we designed it was aimed to be a mobile-first experience that hosts would use. It was a series of checkboxes that you would just go through and say, I have step-free access, or I have a grab rail. Now we're actually bringing in some friction into the experience. We're using more illustrations, Jennifer's illustrations around it. We're building in education into this so that you can understand why this is important for very specific guests. Normally we, in the UX world, think that friction is this terrible thing, that you want this seamless experience. But what we're realizing from early feedback is that this friction is actually helping our audience better adopt the features that we're bringing to product. And so we pull this together into our final principle, that your aim is to design for belonging. The first step of this is really about bursting your audience's bubble. Like, it's okay for them to believe that they are a center of the world, but they shouldn't believe that they are the center of the world. We have a responsibility and an ability to really open up their worldview. Then we can embrace friction. Like, if we want people to come on this journey with us, we're going to need to change some minds. But it's absolutely worth it when you see the effect is that you have better adoption of features and you have better resonance with different groups on your platform. And then lastly, lead with transparency. Share what you're doing with your audience, wherever possible. Like, loop your users in so that they don't feel that this is anything manipulative, that they understand that we're building a future in which we all can belong. So to recap where we have what we've been speaking about, in part one, we learned that you need to own your lens and recognize the decisions, how your own bias affects the decisions you make in product. And you do this by challenging your assumptions, asking, who are we missing, seeking out diversity, and making space for the needs of others. In part two, we learned a few ways that edge cases can drive innovation, and that if you want to bring one of these edges to the center, you need to align it with business needs. And then part three, we learned that you need to be willing to challenge your users, your audience, if you want your efforts to succeed. And together we have our work in progress framework for driving product and user growth. And I'm sharing this early. It is a work in progress, and I would welcome every feedback that you can give on any principles that you've been able to action, because this is something that we want to build together. Now, I know a lot of the things that I've highlighted may seem daunting. There are a lot of steps, potentially, and it requires that we continually work against our desire to have lower cognitive load. But you don't need millions of dollars to own your lens. You don't need a dedicated researcher in order to embrace these edge cases, and you definitely don't need to be afraid of challenging your users. This all starts with us. We can really own that responsibility that we have to build products that create a world in which we all feel like we belong. Thank you.